I never thought a simple notification would destroy my peace. One night, while my husband was in the shower, his phone lit up beside me. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just saw a message from a girl with a picture that left nothing to the imagination. When I opened Instagram, my hands started shaking. There were dozens of messages, flirty, bold, disgusting. And when I confronted him, he didn't even look guilty. He just looked at me and said, "I'm tired of you." That sentence, it changed everything. Please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. My name is Elena, though most people just call me Ellie. I'm 46 years old, a mother of two, and I thought I had a stable marriage until that night. My husband Marcus and I had been together for 16 years. We'd survived sleepless nights, mortgage stress, sick kids, and everything life could throw at us. Or at least, I thought we had. I remember staring at him, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the sound of the shower dripping behind him. "You're tired of me?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "After everything we've built together?" He didn't even blink. He just grabbed a towel, wiped his face, and muttered, "Yeah, I'm tired of coming home to arguments, tired of your attitude, tired of you acting like I'm invisible unless the kids need something." It was like a dagger. He walked past me, his phone still in my hand. For a moment, I thought he'd try to explain, apologize, anything. But he didn't. He just said, "Give me my phone," in that cold, empty tone that told me he'd already checked out of our marriage long before I found those messages. I couldn't even cry at first. I just stood there, numb, staring at the wall as he left the room. My mind was spinning through years of memories. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, those nights we used to fall asleep holding hands. How did we end up here? When I finally opened Instagram again, the reality hit harder. Dozens of messages, compliments, flirty emojis, heart reactions to strangers' photos. Some of the girls were barely older than 20. He'd been calling them beautiful, baby, angel, words he hadn't said to me in years. I scrolled until my hands went numb. Every new message was like a stab wound. Then I saw one that broke me completely. Her, "Does your wife know you text me like this?" Him, "She's too busy with work and kids to care. I'm basically single anyway." That was the moment the tears came. Hot, uncontrollable, bitter tears that felt like poison leaving my body. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone against the wall, but instead I just curled up on the bed and cried until my chest hurt. When he came out again, dressed and scrolling like nothing happened, I whispered, "How long has this been going on?" He didn't even look up. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters," I snapped. "You're my husband." He sighed like I was annoying him. "Look, I'm not cheating, okay? It's just online, just talking. You'd know what that feels like if you weren't always at work or buried in the kids' stuff. You've stopped being a wife. You're just a mother and a manager of the house." His words echoed inside me. I wanted to defend myself, to remind him of all the nights I stayed up helping with his work deadlines, all the weekends I spent cooking for his family, all the sacrifices I made. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been busy, too busy. Between work, the kids, the endless list of responsibilities, I hadn't noticed how far apart we'd grown. But being tired wasn't an excuse for betrayal. That night, he slept in the guest room. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire life had been rewritten in a single sentence. "I'm tired of you." That sentence hit me harder than his, because deep down, I knew it wasn't just his fault. I'd been so focused on being everything to everyone else that I forgot how to be his partner. Still, that didn't excuse the way he disrespected me, the way he made me feel invisible, the way he replaced our intimacy with emojis and empty words sent to strangers. For weeks, we lived like strangers under the same roof. We didn't fight, we didn't talk, we just existed in the same space, pretending everything was normal for the kids' sake. But every time he laughed at his phone, every time he came home smelling like cologne I didn't buy, the wound deepened. One evening while making dinner, I heard our daughter ask him, "Daddy, why don't you smile at Mommy anymore?" He froze. I froze. He gave a weak smile and said, "I do, sweetheart. Daddy's just tired." There it was again, that word, tired. Something inside me broke that day, not from pain, but from exhaustion. I was done begging for love, done waiting for him to notice me. If he was tired of me, fine, but I wasn't going to stay tired of myself. That was the night my revenge began, not out of hatred, but out of heartbreak. I decided that if he wanted distance, I'd give it to him. But while he drifted further away, I would rebuild everything he took for granted: my strength, my beauty, my confidence, my life. The next few weeks were a blur of silence and forced smiles. Marcus and I existed like two ghosts haunting the same house, both of us pretending for the kids, both of us knowing the truth we refused to speak out loud. Every morning I'd wake up before him, just to avoid those awkward glances across the kitchen counter. The smell of his coffee used to mean comfort. Now it smelled like distance. I started noticing the little things: the way he locked his phone every time I entered a room, the faint scent of women's perfume on his jacket when he came home late, the extra time he spent in front of the mirror fixing his hair before leaving for quote-unquote work dinners. I wanted to scream, to break things, to demand honesty, but I didn't. I was tired too. Tired of crying, tired of fighting a losing war, tired of feeling like I was begging for the affection that used to be mine without asking. One night, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat on the edge of our bed and scrolled through old photos on my phone. Pictures from our honeymoon. The way he used to look at me, eyes full of warmth, pride, love. I could still remember the way his fingers used to trace the freckles on my shoulder, as if they were stars only he could see. I missed that version of us. I missed that version of me. I whispered into the dark, when did I stop being enough? The next morning, while getting ready for work, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My hair was tied in the same lazy bun it had been for years. My skin looked dull, my eyes were tired, and that's when something in me shifted. Not from vanity, but from clarity. If Marcus couldn't see me anymore, maybe it was because I couldn't see myself either. That day, during lunch, I walked past a salon I used to go to before I had kids. I stopped outside, staring through the glass at women laughing, smiling, getting pampered. For a moment, I felt out of place. Too old, too worn out, too broken. But then I pushed the door open. When I left 2 hours later, my hair was freshly cut, soft waves framing my face again. I hadn't looked that alive in years. The stylist, a young woman named Tasha, smiled and said, "You've got kind eyes. You just forgot how to look at yourself." That night, when Marcus came home, he paused for a split second when he saw me. Not long, but long enough. He said nothing, just muttered, "Hey," and walked to his room. But that tiny pause, that flicker of surprise, gave me something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that he'd come back. Hope that I could come back to myself. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes. I began waking up earlier, taking walks around the neighborhood, eating better, and doing things I hadn't done in years: reading, painting, listening to music. Sometimes I'd catch Marcus watching me quietly from across the living room, confusion in his eyes, like he didn't quite know who I was anymore. One evening, as I was setting the table, he said, "You've changed lately." I looked at him and smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just remembering who I used to be. He didn't respond, just went back to scrolling through his phone, but I could tell the distance that once felt like a wall was starting to shift. Not closer, but unsteady. He was noticing, even if he pretended not to. Inside, though, the guilt was still there. Late at night, I'd lie awake replaying our arguments, all the times I brushed him off because I was too tired or too busy. I realized how many little chances I'd missed to make him feel seen. I used to think I was being strong by carrying everything on my shoulders: the house, the kids, the finances. But maybe in the process, I'd stopped holding him. I couldn't change what he'd done, but I could face what I'd done wrong too. There were moments when I almost gave up, moments when I caught him smiling at his phone or when he came home smelling like unfamiliar perfume again. The old me would have screamed, accused, demanded answers, but this version of me stayed quiet, patient, calculating. I wasn't seeking revenge in a loud, fiery way. My revenge was quieter, slower.
I wanted him to see what it meant to lose the woman he'd taken for granted, not through anger, but through absence. I started dressing up more, not for him, but for me. I'd wear perfume again, the same scent I wore when we first met. I'd hum to myself while cooking. I even joined a yoga class and met new people, men and women, who made me feel like a person again, not just someone's wife or mother. Marcus began to act differently. He wasn't cruel, but he became curious. Sometimes he'd ask, "Where are you going dressed like that?" Or, "Who are you meeting?" It was subtle, but it was there, that edge of possessiveness he'd lost months ago. I didn't answer directly. I'd smile and say, "Just living my life." One weekend he asked if I wanted to go out for dinner, something we hadn't done in almost a year. I hesitated, then agreed. We went to a small Italian place we used to love. The food tasted the same, but we didn't. He watched me closely all evening, like trying to read a language he'd forgotten how to speak. At one point he said softly, "You look different, happier." I smiled. "I guess I am."
He nodded slowly, his expression conflicted. I didn't realize how much we drifted until lately. The honesty in his tone stung. I wanted to tell him it wasn't too late, that maybe, just maybe, if he tried, we could rebuild something. But then my phone buzzed. A message from Tasha, the stylist turned friend, asking if I'd made it home safe from the last yoga session. Marcus glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Tasha, huh?" I smirked. "She's a friend, don't worry." He looked away, pretending not to care, but I saw the flicker of jealousy, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel pain. I felt power. It wasn't about making him jealous. It was about balance. The universe had shifted, and for once, I wasn't the one begging to be seen. A week later, I caught him staring at me while I was helping our son with homework. His eyes lingered in a way I hadn't seen in years, not with contempt, but with longing. And that's when I realized something crucial. He didn't want me when I needed him, but now that I was becoming whole again, he wanted to be part of the glow. That was his punishment, to watch the woman he once dismissed become someone he couldn't reach anymore. But my heart wasn't done healing yet, because beneath the newfound confidence, there was still pain, a quiet ache that whispered late at night, "You still love him." And I did, despite everything, despite the betrayal, the disrespect, the distance. I still loved Marcus, but love alone wasn't enough anymore. So, I decided the next stage of my revenge would be both tender and cruel. I'd show him what it truly meant to lose someone who still cared. I used to believe revenge meant destruction, loud, explosive, dramatic. But as days turned into weeks, I learned it could be something entirely different. Revenge could be quiet, graceful, and slow, the kind that doesn't scream, it blooms. And mine did. I started taking small, deliberate steps toward a life that didn't revolve around Marcus anymore. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, women who had gone through their own heartbreaks, who understood what it meant to lose yourself in someone else's shadow. We met for brunch, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and talked about everything: work, dreams, the future. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't Marcus's wife. I was Ellie again. I began volunteering at a local community art center. Painting had always been my secret escape, something I'd given up when motherhood and marriage swallowed me whole. The first time I picked up a brush again, I cried. It felt like holding a piece of my soul I'd buried years ago. One of the instructors, a kind, older man named Richard, noticed my hesitation. "You've got something in your hands," he said, one afternoon, glancing at my half-finished canvas. "You just forgot how to trust it." I smiled, brushing away tears. "Yeah, I think I forgot a lot of things." The more I painted, the more I healed. My strokes grew bolder, my colors brighter. Every canvas became a confession. The pain, the betrayal, the regret, but also the rebirth. Meanwhile, Marcus began to shift. He'd come home earlier, he'd hover in the kitchen trying to make small talk. He started asking about my day, my classes, even about Richard. Casual, but with that hint of curiosity he couldn't hide. It was strange watching him like this,
The man who once couldn't look me in the eye was now studying me like a stranger he couldn't read. One evening, he came home with takeout from my favorite Thai place. "Thought you might like this," he said, setting the bag on the table. I looked up from my sketchbook. "Thanks," I said politely. But my tone was calm, neutral, the same way he'd sounded months ago when I used to ask if he'd be home for dinner. He hesitated before sitting down. "You've been different lately." I didn't answer, just kept eating slowly. After a long pause, he said, "I missed how things used to be." That hit me harder than I expected. My fork froze midair. I wanted to scream, "You miss it now, after breaking me?" But instead, I just smiled faintly. "We can't go back, Marcus. Not to what was, only to what's left." He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the table. "And what's left?" I took a deep breath. "It depends on how much you're willing to change." It was the first time in months I'd given him anything close to a chance, but I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for closure. After that night, he started trying again. Little gestures, morning coffee waiting for me, texts during the day, offers to help with dinner, but I didn't melt like before. I kept my distance because deep down, I knew he wasn't chasing me. He was chasing the version of me that made him feel secure, the version he destroyed. And I wasn't that woman anymore. My quiet revenge was working. He was restless, uncertain, jealous. Sometimes he'd ask questions just to gauge my reaction. "You've been spending a lot of time at that art center, huh? You and Richard seem close." I'd smile softly. He is kind. He listens. That one sentence did more damage than any fight could ever. I saw it in his eyes, the realization that someone else was giving me what he'd stopped giving long ago, attention. But what he didn't know was that Richard wasn't anything romantic. He was simply the mirror I needed, the one that reflected the version of myself I'd forgotten existed. The real transformation happened the day Marcus asked me if I wanted to go on a weekend trip. Just us.
We hadn't traveled together in years. A part of me wanted to say yes, to test if something real could be rebuilt. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw desperation, not love, guilt, not growth. So I said, "No, I already made plans." He blinked, confused. "With who?" I smiled, grabbing my purse. "With myself." That weekend, I went alone to a small coastal town I'd always wanted to visit. I walked along the beach at sunrise, hair blowing in the wind, the world painted in soft gold. I felt light, not because I'd moved on completely, but because I was finally learning how to live without waiting for someone to follow. That night, as I watched the waves crash against the shore, I thought about Marcus. About how everything fell apart, about how, in some twisted way, his betrayal had freed me. For the first time, I whispered something that used to terrify me. Maybe losing him was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I got home Sunday evening, he was waiting in the kitchen. His eyes were red, not from anger, but from something deeper. "You didn't answer my calls," he said quietly. "I needed some space," I replied, setting down my bag. He looked at me for a long time before speaking again. "Ellie, I don't know who you are anymore." I smiled, gently. "I do." That night, he didn't sleep in our room, and for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't angry, or sad, or bitter. I just was. My revenge wasn't about hurting him anymore. It was about becoming someone he could no longer control, no longer define. The woman he'd taken for granted had burned quietly, and from those ashes, something stronger had risen. But deep inside, I knew this story wasn't over yet, because Marcus wasn't the kind of man who could watch someone walk away without trying to pull them back. And soon, I'd learn just how far he'd go to reclaim what he'd lost. It started subtly, the way Marcus began to fall apart. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the more I pulled away, the more his confidence crumbled. He wasn't the same man who once dismissed me so easily. One evening, as I was getting ready to leave for an art exhibition, my first one, by the way, where 3 of my paintings were being showcased, he stood by the door, watching me. "You look incredible," he said softly. His voice almost cracked. "Thank you," I replied, adjusting my earrings. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "You've changed so much, Ellie. You're glowing." I smiled faintly. It's amazing what happens when you stop apologizing for existing. That line lingered in the air between us. For once, he didn't have a comeback. The gallery was packed that night. My name, Elena Morgan, was printed on a clean white label beneath my work. People stopped, admired, and asked questions. I felt proud, not for revenge, but for rediscovering myself. But halfway through the evening, I saw him, Marcus, standing in the corner, hands in his pockets, watching me from across the room. I froze for a second. He caught my eye and smiled nervously. He came closer, voice low. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to see what you've been working on." "It's fine," I said coolly. "You're welcome here." He looked at one of the paintings, a portrait of a woman sitting alone by a window, the sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The caption underneath read, "After the rain." He stared at it for a long moment, then turned to me. "Is that you?" I didn't answer directly. "It's every woman who's ever forgotten her own light." He swallowed hard. "You're amazing, Ellie. I wish I'd seen it before." My lips tightened. "You did see it, Marcus. You just didn't care until it stopped belonging to you." He winced like I'd slapped him. That night after the exhibition, he waited by my car. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. We sat inside, silence filling the space like fog. Finally, he said, "I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. About us." I looked out the window. "You mean about the girls? The messages? The way you told me you were tired of me?" His voice broke. "Yes, God, yes. I was stupid. I was selfish. You didn't deserve that. You were always there, the kids, the house, the bills, and I made you feel invisible." I finally turned to him. "You didn't make me feel invisible, Marcus. You made me feel replaceable. That's worse." He covered his face with his hands. "I ruined everything." "You did," I said quietly, "and I can't fix it for you." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Can we at least try? I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes." I studied his face. For a brief second, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the boy who once held me under a summer sky and promised forever. But that boy was gone. "I don't think we can," I said softly. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Marcus," I whispered, "you killed something in me, but you also gave birth to something else. The woman I've become, she doesn't fit in the life we had." He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I still love you, Ellie." I took a deep breath. "Then love me enough to let me go." The tears fell before I could stop them, not because I missed him, but because I was finally closing a chapter that had defined so much of my life. He left that night without another word. I sat there in the car long after he was gone, breathing through the ache. My heart wasn't heavy anymore. It was free. Weeks passed. He tried reaching out a few times. Texts, calls, even flowers at my door. I didn't respond. My silence became my loudest statement. One afternoon, his sister called me. "Ellie, he's not doing well," she said. "He's drinking a lot. Keeps saying he messed up the only good thing he ever had." I listened quietly. "He'll figure it out," I said gently. "We all have to face what we've done." And that's when I realized this was the real revenge. Not his pain, but his awareness. The weight of his own actions crashing down until he couldn't escape it. He once made me feel worthless. Now he was drowning in the worth he'd thrown away. Months later, I saw him again, by accident. I was at a cafe with friends when he walked in. He looked tired, older somehow. When he noticed me, he froze. I smiled politely, nodded, then turned back to my coffee. But as I left, he called out, "Ellie?" I stopped at the door. "Yes?" "You look happy," he said quietly. "I am." He smiled weakly. "Good. You deserve it." I nodded once. "So do you, if you ever forgive yourself." And I walked away. That was the moment I knew it was over. Truly over. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally understood that revenge isn't about making them bleed. It's about making them see. Marcus saw. And I, for the first time in years, saw myself clearly too. When I got home that night, I stood in front of the mirror. The same woman looked back at me, but her eyes were different. Brighter, softer, stronger. I whispered to her, "You did it. You found yourself again." And just like that, the ache inside me turned into peace. Sometimes revenge doesn't end in fire or fury. Sometimes it ends in silence. The kind that comes when you've finally forgiven the person who hurt you, and yourself for letting them. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have waited for him to change or walked away like I did? Be honest in the comments. I want to know what you think. It's strange, isn't it? How life can crumble, burn to ashes, and still, somehow, grow something beautiful out of the wreckage. Months passed after that last encounter with Marcus. I didn't block him. I didn't erase him. I simply stopped carrying him with me. He became a shadow, still there, still visible in moments, but never strong enough to pull me back. I poured myself into painting, into living. My art grew bolder. I started teaching classes, helping other women use creativity to heal, women who came to me broken, betrayed, abandoned. I saw myself in them every time. One afternoon after class, one of my students, a shy middle-aged woman, lingered behind. She said, "You make it look so easy. Letting go." I smiled gently. It wasn't easy. It took me years to realize I was holding on to something that didn't want to stay. She nodded slowly. "And now you're happy?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Yes, but not because everything is perfect. I'm happy because I stopped waiting for someone else to make it right." That night, I sat on my porch watching the sunset melt across the sky. The light hit the horizon just right. Soft, golden, peaceful. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't thought about Marcus all day. Not once. I laughed quietly to myself. That was the real revenge. Not his regret, not his tears, but my freedom, my peace. Still, sometimes, when the world goes quiet, I remember that woman I used to be, exhausted, unseen, drowning in routines and expectations. I wish I could reach back and hold her hand. Tell her, "You'll be okay. One day, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined." And I think I did all of this, the changes, the transformation, the rediscovery, not to hurt Marcus, but to heal her, the version of me who gave and gave until there was nothing left. It took losing him to find her again. Sometimes I still catch glimpses of him online, photos, updates, posts that don't quite hide the loneliness behind his smile. I don't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sadness for what could have been. He once told me, "You've changed too much." He was right. I did change, but not for him, for me. I started dressing differently, taking care of myself again, not to impress, but to feel alive. I learned to enjoy silence, to read books late into the night, and to dance in my kitchen with music blaring and no one watching. And somewhere between all those little moments, I fell in love again, not with someone else, but with life itself. I think the saddest part of any love story is realizing that sometimes we fight so hard to keep someone when the real battle is learning how to keep ourselves. Marcus once said he was tired of me. Now, I'm grateful, because that sentence, the one that broke me, also woke me up. If you've ever been in that kind of pain, where you question your worth, your choices, your whole identity, hear me when I say this. You are not the things people get tired of. You are not disposable. You are not less because someone failed to see your light. Sometimes, you just need to step out of their shadow to realize you were glowing all along. That's what I did. That's what I want you to do. I don't hate Marcus. I don't love him either. I simply understand him. He made his choices, and I made mine. In a way, I should thank him, because his betrayal forced me to rebuild my world from the ground up, and in doing so, I created something more beautiful than I ever had with him. Now, when people ask me, "What's your secret? How did you move on?" I just smile and say, by remembering who I was before they forgot me. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like revenge at all. It looks like peace, like a woman standing tall, smiling softly, unbothered by the ghosts of her past. I'm not that broken wife anymore. I'm Alina. Ellie, 46 years old, mother, artist, survivor. And I finally understand that my story was never about losing him. It was about finding me. So if you've made it this far into my story, thank you. Please give it a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after someone broke you? What did you learn about who you really are? Because for me, the biggest revenge wasn't proving him wrong. It was finally becoming everything he said I couldn't be.